It'll be a good morning. Yes, we are in week 2 of Advent, which is phenomenal. And we are in the book of Genesis still, as we will continue to be right up until Christmas Eve. Last week, we looked at, a lot. If you weren't here, we tried to cram like 14 DBS Discovery Bible Study sessions into one 20-minute sermon. So that was good. And then we tried to crash in another probably 5 to 10 in the faith formation time afterwards. So a really quick summary is there is this promise that came out of the Garden of Eden where we were waiting for someone to crush the heel of the serpent who gets cursed. And that continued on until they selected Abram. And the reason that we said God selected Abram was because he was willing to surrender his future. He was unable to have kids. He was unable to make a name for himself. And so God said, I can use him to make a name for myself. And then he continued on in the story, which we didn't get to, and he failed many times. But the end of his life is what we talked about in faith formation a little bit, and it's the story of Isaac, and it's finally the story of his full surrender at the end of his life to saying, I'm going to surrender all that I am, all of my future, all of it to God, and that's kind of the end of his story. And so it begins and it ends with this posture of surrender and giving his name over to the Lord and allowing him to do what he wants with it. We're not going to look at Isaac at all in this time. If you wanted to, he's, in the 23 to 24, 5 range in Genesis, and so I encourage you to do that. But over next Sunday is the kids, which is great, but this Sunday and 2 from now, we're going to look at the bookends of Jacob's life. So we did the beginning of Abram and his surrender, and then if you came to faith formation time, you got the end of his life. Today we're going to look at the beginning of Jacob. 2 weeks from now, we're going to look at the end of Jacob. And we're not going to look right at the beginning of Jacob. The quick summary is that he's doing a very poor job. He is stealing birthrights, he's stealing from his brother, he's deceptive, and his name literally means deceiver or heel grabber, which is really fascinating. Because that is what the serpent was. And yet God chooses this man to partner with and to produce the blessing that goes through. And while he's on his way away from, deceiving and stealing and whatnot, and his brother wants to kill him, so he's on the run, he has this dream. And this is probably the point in the story where his life begins to switch a little bit. It's the first time when he has an encounter with God, and it's also the first time where we begin to see the messiahship born into the story, and we begin to think that this person who is going to be born is not only great in power, but also a king. And so how does it begin? Oh, I need to turn my clicker on, which we have found, and I am overjoyed about, unless it doesn't work. All right, whoever's at the back, I got the laser pointer. Oh, there we go. He had this dream, and he saw a stairway resting on the earth with its top reaching to heaven, and the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And so my translation says above it. We just heard a reading that said beside it, but it says there above it, and I have a little note at the bottom. It's could be beside, stood the Lord. And he said, I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham, the God of Isaac. I will give you and your descendants the land on which you are laying. And then it talks about how your descendants will be the dust of the earth. You'll spread out to the west and to the east, to the north and to the south. All peoples will be blessed through you and your offspring, or your seed, which we talked a little bit about last time. And so God is saying, you are the son whom the blessing is going to come through. You have a brother. It's not going to come through him. Last week, there was this debate of should it come through Ishmael, should it come through Isaac, should it come through Lot? And God said it's going to come through Isaac. And now Isaac has multiple sons. Should it come through Esau or should it come through Jacob? And here God is saying, you, Jacob, are going to be the one whom the blessing comes through. And it's really interesting that this verb is so decisive about where the Lord is in this vision that he's having. So I said that my translation says they're above it, the place or the stairway that is reaching to the heavens and connected to the earth. Somewhere he sees the Lord in this vision. And one translation says above it, one says beside him. Another reading could be upon it. There upon it, upon the stairway, you see the Lord. And so you begin to ask the question, where is God in this picture and why is it important? Now, we don't really have great clarity if we just look at this one verb, but we do have this verb being quoted by Jesus later on in the story, and my clicker just doesn't work, so I'm going to need help. Here we have John's gospel, where he's speaking to Nathanael, whom he has just called, and who's making a bold declaration about who Jesus is. Welcome to the Gospel of John. And he says, "Very truly, I tell you, you will see heaven open and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man." Now, this is obviously a parallel, a hyperlink, all the way back to this vision that Jacob is having. And Jesus is saying, you, Nathanael, at some point in your life are going to have the same vision that I gave to Jacob. You're going to see the heavens open and the angels ascending and descending, but the Son of Man is not going to be beside you. He's not going to be above you. It's the stairway, the connecting place of heaven and earth is going to be on the Son of Man. The Lord is on the stairway. He is the connecting point between heaven and earth. And Nathanael saw that when Jesus was high and lifted up on the cross. And so this story of Jacob's dream at Bethel, the first vision, the first encounter that he has with the Lord, is the vision of Jesus connecting heaven and earth on the cross. And I don't know if he would have actually seen Jesus on the cross. I'm not making that bold claim, but what he is seeing is that in the future, the promise that you're having is that the Lord is going to come and unite heaven and earth. And what is his response? It's pretty impressive. I usually tell people that like 3/4 of preaching is just rereading the Bible and saying, isn't that amazing? And then as soon as you do that, people are like, oh, it really is good. But it says, when Jacob awoke from his sleep, he thought, the Lord is in this place, and I was not aware of it. Oh, it's amazing. And he was afraid and said, how awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God. This is the gate of heaven. And it's making a little bit more sense, right? If this is the connecting point between heaven and earth, if Jesus is actually on the cross in this vision, or if this is what he's supposed to be picturing, yes, this is the entryway to heaven. This is the gate, the way back to Eden that they had to leave as a result of sin. And then, what is his response? Early the next morning, Jacob took the stone he had placed under his head, which is hilarious. You know, I don't know if we think about this enough. He decided, I'm going to sleep on a rock. I don't know what you guys do for pillows, but I don't think a stone is what I would pick. And I'm sure there's probably more to that. Like, I don't know if his head was really close to the rock. I don't know. But he's sleeping on this rock. And he placed it under his head and set it up as a pillar. And he poured oil on it. He called that place Bethel, though the city used to be called Luz. Bethel is 2 words. It's Beth, which means house. It's a great name. And El for Elohim, which is like the Lord. And so it's God's house. Bethel, God's house, though the city used to be called Luz. And he anoints the rock that he was sleeping on. Now, there is a word for anointing a king, and it's like, it's something with an M. My Hebrew's really bad. It's masach or something along these lines. You probably have to spit somewhere in there. And that word is not used in this story. But it is used 3 chapters later when he's having this vision of God coming to him again. And he says, I am the Lord that you met here in the story right now when you anointed, when you masach, when you poured oil on the rock, when you had the first declaration that a king is coming. And that's what the pouring of oil means. You pour oil, you smear someone with this to say that you are a king. Later in the story, we see that Samuel smears David with oil, and at that moment, he was the king. He wasn't that Saul was the king right now. No, David was the king, and they hadn't put it together yet, and he was going to be anointed. Well, he was going to come into his rule and his kingship, but that was the moment where he was the king. He was anointed. He was smeared with oil by Samuel. And here we have the first promise that not only is there going to be one to come and defeat the serpent, but he's going to be like a king. And so we have to ask the question, what kind of a king is he going to be? Well, the first response is that there's going to be a shift in the world, a shift in the place that he was. Remember last week we talked about how Canaan was cursed. And Canaan is the very land that Abram is told his descendants are going to come and possess. God is going to give you the cursed land, and he is going to transform it. And here God is doing the same thing. He is transforming the land of Luz into the land of Bethel by this king. Which makes you ask the question, what does the name Luz mean? I'm sure everyone's asked it. The name Luz is the name for twisted, which is really important when you understand that the tree of the knowledge of good and evil is actually the tree of Tob and Ra. Super fun. And Ra is, like they used to have, Hebrew has so many cool things. They have numbers with it. It has words. It has little pictures, and so God uses this language to like communicate meaning in so many different ways, and it's just incredible. English would never do enough. But there's this little picture for Ra, because you're like, how are you going to, showcase what evil is? Because you have to be able to describe it with a little picture, and so they have two. And when you have the picture for evil, it's like a little man's head, and then it's a rope that gets really twisted. It's like two strands that are twisted together. And so to be evil is to have like your thoughts shifted or changed, or like something that's kind of good, but it's altered or it's changed in some way. And so that's usually what you see in evil, right? There's some sort of temptation. There's something underlying it, which is good and which is desirable and that you want, but it's changed, it's twisted in some way. And that's what the city of Luz is. It's changed, it's twisted, it's messed up in some way. And when God's presence comes, when the anointed one, the rock that is going to become the Messiah, shows on the scene, he takes what is twisted and he makes it the house of God. This is the promise that God is revealing to Jacob all the way back in Genesis 28. And now we have to ask the question, okay, so there's a Messiah that's coming. There's this anointed one that we're waiting for to come and defeat the power of sin and death. And so this is what the people would have been waiting for. And this is where we offset, the normal Christian narrative just a little bit in the Advent season. Because we have come to know that the Messiah is through the line of Judah, through the line of David. And it's kind of hit over and over again. We have many psalms about it. We have many songs about it, many hymns about it, that the son of David is who is born in Bethlehem. And it's true, and it's right. And if you come back in 2 weeks, I'm going to drive that home. But right now, you need to know that the Jewish people were waiting for two Messiahs. They just didn't think that it would be the same person. You see, the tribes of Jacob the sons of Jacob became 12 tribes. And the Jewish people were awaiting two different people to set Israel right. And one of them is this son of David, who's going to come and set up a rule and a kingdom and a nation that will never end or never fail. And he will rule from the heavens, and his dominion will be everlasting. But they were also waiting for someone who is going to come as lowly and die and be raised to life, and their death to make atonement. And this picture of, and then they'll rise in power, and they will actually gore the nations with their strength. And it's really this weird picture. And they thought, and that's known as the son of Joseph. And they thought, well, if we're really holy, if we're really pure, if we're really good and righteous, then God will send the Son of David. And if we, get it wrong and don't follow the law quite enough, then he's going to send us the son of Joseph, and he'll straighten us out a little bit, and then he'll send the son of David after that. And so that's, I think, why we get this really awkward exchange with Jesus in all of the Gospels except for John, where we have this story. I think I have it from Matthew in my slides. Yeah, where he is being questioned by these Pharisees and Sadducees and teachers of the law, and everyone's questioning him, and we have this taxes to Caesar thing, the Sadducees resurrection thing. Jesus asks about the greatest commandment. And then after all of these in all the Gospels, we get this question of Jesus's offense back at the Pharisees. He says, "What do you think about the Messiah? Whose son is he?" "The son of David," they replied. And he said to them, "How is it then that David, speaking by the Spirit, calls him Lord? For he says, 'The Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I put your enemies under your feet.' If then David calls him Lord, how can he be his son?" Now that's quoting Psalm 110, which shows up 4 times in the New Testament. Remember that when I said if you see something repeating itself multiple times in the Bible, it's really important. So go and read Psalm 110 this week and ask yourself the question, why is this quoted so many times in the Bible? Now, here's his question of offense to the Pharisees. There are many people in the scriptures who declare that Jesus is the son of David. We see angels, we see shepherds, we see the Simeon, this guy who will come, and we never see Jesus until Revelation claim that he is the son of David. And here he's asking the Pharisees, who is the son of David? Basically, he's asking them the question, who do you want the Messiah to be? And they are currently planning on killing him. And so they say the son of David. And there's one way to read this passage, which I think we often do, which is the preeminence of Christ, which is you are before him, and he was the firstborn among the dead, and all things and all powers and all dominions, and you were at the beginning, and all of these things are true about Jesus. But there's another, that is to say, Jesus is going to come as the son of Joseph, and he is going to hand over his kingdom to the son of David, and he is going to be both of these people. And actually, the way to the kingship, the way to the messiahship, is what we have been waiting for this entire story. Someone who is going to be struck by the serpent and is going to rise in power. But where is this coming from? This is sounding really good, but it's got to be scriptural. It's got to be based somewhere. And this is where I use a guy named David Mitchell, who is very smart, and he wrote a very heavy book, which I skimmed. And I found a couple of passages of scripture that I really like. And they come from Genesis 49, and they come from Deuteronomy 33. And these are the blessings that are pronounced on the children of Jacob. Jacob obviously having 12 sons, and this is, in both cases, what is to come. So the first one, Genesis 49, Jacob is about to die, and he's saying, this is what's going to happen to your children as you go into Egypt. And then at the end of Deuteronomy, Moses is about to die, and he says, this is what's going to be about the tribes of Egypt, or the tribes of Israel, as you go into the promised land. So both of these blessings are on the 12 tribes, and one is at the end of Jacob's life, and one is at the end of Moses' life. We're going to start with the Jacob one. And if you look at it in your Bible, which I encourage you to do, you'll notice that all 12 tribes get blessed. They're incredible, and they have lots of depth and meaning. And in the Genesis 49 account, you can read Judah's, and you think, yeah, there's probably going to be a king that comes from this guy. But if you read Joseph's, you'll notice that it's the longest one. It's full because he was obviously the best brother, right? And God is clearly going to be using him. And when the kingdom splits later on in the story, there's the tribe of Judah, which holds kings, and there's the tribe of Ephraim, or the tribe of Joseph's firstborn, or technically second, but firstborn because of Jacob's thing. It's the whole thing. But Jacob's descendants, or Joseph's descendants, become the kings of Israel. And here's the blessing itself. It says, your father's blessings are greater than the blessings of the ancient mountains, the bounty of the age-old hill. Let all these rest on the head of Joseph, on the brow of the prince among his brothers. Anything resting on the brow, or anything that is called the prince, these are all like kingly statements. And then we get the one in Deuteronomy, and the exact same idea occurs right before the verse that I put up on the screen. You'll first of all notice that Judah gets like one verse, nothing about being a king in it, which is pretty fascinating. Asher gets a ton. And Joseph gets almost the same blessing. It's really long. And then right before it, it says, let all these rest on the head of Joseph, on the brow of the prince among his brothers. So here's the second mention of this kingliness, this messiahship, this future king from the line of Joseph. And then it says this, in majesty, this is Joseph, he is like a firstborn bull. His horns are the horns of a wild ox. With them he will gore the nations, even those at the end of the earth. Now, that should probably clear it up for everybody. But if it didn't, you have to know that in the law at this point, the firstborn bull is destined to die. If you read in Numbers, the firstborn bull, God says, is mine. The firstborn of the womb of all these animals is mine. And you are to bring the firstborn bull to the altar. You're to kill it, and its blood is going to atone for the sins of Israel. And so if you are a firstborn bull, your destiny is you're going to die for the atonement of sins. That's what the law says. But then it says his horns are the horns of a wild ox. The Hebrew is an olrox, which is, it sounds mighty, right? An olrox. And so they're different animals, and the olrox doesn't exist anymore. It's extinct, but the idea is this bull is like a lowly, it's domesticated, it's small in stature compared to like the olrox, which is, it cannot be tamed, and it's huge, and it's mighty and magnificent and powerful, and it's like the size of an elephant, but it's got these horns of majestic strength, and somehow this bull that is destined to die and make atonement is going to rise. It's going to be transformed into something new, into this mighty wild ox. And the horns, the power, the strength of this new animal is going to gore the nations to the ends of the earth until he hands his dominion and power over to the son of David. So why is this important? Is the question. One, because it's awesome. Remember, that's the whole point of preaching. But two, because we need to recognize that the scriptures and the Bible that we are reading is not being put back based on the accounts that we have. Rather, it's not like we've seen Jesus' life and now we have to go and fix the Bible. We have to go and change it. We have to go and manufacture some way to make sense of this. No. We need to read this and recognize that this was God's plan from the start. That God always planned to have a son of Joseph, the first person to become a Messiah figure, the first person to die as a firstborn and have his blood make the atonement for Israel and rise in majesty and power. This is the plan of God. So that we know that we can trust the promises of God that we see elsewhere in Scripture. That we know that we are able to listen to a God who is faithful, he is trustworthy, and that he is good. And so if we can take confidence that this is the plan that God has had for us from the start, we will be able to trust the Lord when he comes and speaks to us in our own lives. And this is how Jacob's story ends in Genesis 28. It says that he sets up this rock, he anoints it, he says, "You are the Lord, you are setting up the house of God in what used to be the land of sin." And he says, "If God will be with me and will watch over me on this journey, if I'm the one that I'm taking, and will give me food to eat and clothes to wear so that I return safely to my Father's house, then the Lord will be my God. And this stone, this anointed rock, this king present future idea that I've set up as a pillar will be God's house. And of all that you give me, I will give you a tenth." God is revealing himself to Jacob as faithful, as a future king, as fulfilling the promise that he made all the way back in the garden. And Jacob is taking the first step of surrender in his life. He is encountering the God of Israel for the first time, and he says, "I am willing to take one step of obedience. I am willing to walk with you into the unknown of my journey to Paddan Aram. I am willing to suggest that you are the God of my forefathers, and you are the God who is going to restore creation." And we're going to see what he's like at the end of his journey as well. But here he is in the first posture of surrender, and God again says, "I can use that. I can work with that. I can multiply that. I can give him descendants. I can give him future kings. I can give him the offspring that will make a name for myself, and I can give him the one who is to come." And here we have maybe the last thing I'll mention. He gives a tenth of what he has to the Lord in this moment. And this is a callback to when Abram gives a tenth to this guy named Melchizedek, which is a whole other thing. And this is not like a prescriptive thing. Oftentimes when we read this, we think, I'll give a tenth because Jacob gave a tenth, or I'll give a tenth because Abram gave a tenth. And in both stories, they are at the beginning of their journeys of trusting in the Lord. And this is the beginning of their stories of surrender. And what God is going to consistently ask is that we give not only a tenth, but our entire lives to him. He's going to ask for complete surrender. And he's going to accept where we are at the beginning of our stories, but he is going to continue to call us into uncomfortable places. And he is going to be assuring us that he is trustworthy, that he is faithful, and that his plans have been established from the beginning. That he is like a firstborn bull, and that he is like a wild aurochs. He is like a king who has come to die, and a king that is coming again to reign forever. He is trustworthy, he is good, and he is worthy of our surrender. Thanks be to God.